Could we be moving closer to solving the long-running debate about where the Elgin Marbles should be homed? They were brought to Britain from Greece by Lord Elgin in the 19th century, but many people think the time has come for them to be returned. And John Lefas, a rich Greek businessman, is going to invest millions in a campaign to lobby MPs and try to get the marbles and other ancient artworks to return to their former homes. So joining me now to debate this issue, I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Tessa Dunlop, the historian, writer and broadcaster, and the archaeologist Mario Trabucco della Torretta. So, Dr. Dunlop, I'm going to come to you first. Can you give us some background for those who don't know? How is it that these marbles from the Parthenon ended up in Britain?
Well, first of all, you erroneously referred to them as the Elgin Marbles. Now, and if you want to be bang on trend, Andrew, they are actually Parthenon marbles.
Yeah, I did it to annoy you.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure you did do it to me. And Elgin, of course, there still is the Lord Elgin. I think we're on to the 9th or 10th Elgin now. But he was a soldier and a diplomat, propping up the great power that was Britain in the early 19th century with our chums, the Ottomans.
Yes.
And he was apparently, although it's contested historically, given permission to save vast, huge amounts of marble. I mean, hundreds of feet knocked off the Parthenon, doing yet more damage. His claim was he was saving these extraordinary 2.5 millennial old artefacts, some of the finest. That's uncontested. This is the finest,
yes,
classical art in the whole wide world. He dumped it in boats, brought it over to Britain, apparently to look after it so everyone could see it. Well, he stuck it in his own private collection until, of course, he went bankrupt. I think he had a dirty divorce. Men like this tend to. And anyway, in the end, the British government bought them off him and they were put in the museum for all the world to see. We managed to clean them very badly in the 1930s, scratched them. But hey, don't worry, we were keeping them away from the perfidious Greeks, who by this time had wriggled free of the Ottomans and have woken up increasingly in the 20th century and thought, we want our marbles back.
Now,
thank you very much.
I'm going to come over to Mario Trabucco. What do you make of that argument that, this was effectively someone pilfering something that just did not belong to them?
First of all, the problem is they did belong to the Ottomans, because the Ottomans were the lawful owners of all the Ottoman Empire. And Greece was a part of the Ottoman Empire just in the same way as Wales is part of the British Empire, or was part of the British Empire. So it was an integral part of their territory. So because of these, we cannot say that they were outside of the scope of the power of the Ottoman Empire.
You don't suggest that you say he had permission, effectively.
Yes, he did.
It's contested, isn't it,
historically?
historically?
Accurate, and it actually is corroborated by analysis from Ottoman history experts, for example.
Actually, they've struggled to find the precise document in the otherwise extensive Ottoman archives. But moving on from that, you wouldn't contest that these Parthenon marbles are the soul of Greece. I mean, they belong there. There is a beautiful museum that's been erected there, the Acropolis Museum, in 2009. There is a whole gaping parts of the museum waiting for these marbles to be returned.
It's very interesting in the Acropolis Museum, if you go around there. I mean, it's particularly well situated because you can see the Parthenon directly opposite. And you can see the gaps in the marbles where they are, and it says where they are. Absolutely. And a lot of them are in the British Museum. So would you accept this argument that just aesthetically they belong back where they were created?
Aesthetically, is only part of the answer at the end of the day, because the problem is they are an historical monument. They are part, they witnessed the heyday of a civilization. So they are not just a work of art. In a way, if you look at them just as a work of art, you commit an even greater crime than breaking them apart.
Do you accept, Tessa Dunlop, that I know you mentioned the scratching and the cleaning in the 1930s. There have been experts who have said quite clearly that had they been left at the Acropolis, they would have been degraded by now.
I agree, Andrew.
Yes.
And what we can do is we can package this so beautifully. We can say, we've looked after these for you, Greece. And just in a classy act of unprecedented returnism.
So you don't dispute that there's a point there?
No, I think that we have looked after them well, and we can spin that to make so-called global Brexit Britain look generous. We're world leaders, and we're going to bestow back to you, European Greece, these founding stones of yours and our heritage.
But how far do you go with this? Because there are museums all over the world that have various items that have been pilfered from all sorts of civilizations.
That is not an argument to deny Greece the most world-famous UNESCO site. This is the heart of democracy. You can experience these marbles 2,500 years on where they were first created. It makes me almost cry. I refuse to go and visit them in the British Museum. I think it's disgusting. And I tell you what, I wonder what your audience think, because while the British establishment, left and right, the Tristan Hunts and the Woolly Liberals and the Neil McGregors, they make money from it, just like David Cameron and Boris Johnson go, no, returnism. They're all the same piggies in the trough. But if you ask the decent British public what they think, I wonder if are we allowed to do a poll in your audience?
Let's not do that. I might do it at the end. We're going to come to you, Mario, first. What do you make of this argument, though? I mean, very passionately delivered, and she has a point.
Absolutely. The problem is we wouldn't do what Elgin has done 200 years ago today. We definitely wouldn't. Who would? The problem is back then the sensibility was simply different. The Ottomans themselves, they simply didn't value the items in the same way as we do.
If you acknowledge that we now would not do what Lord Elgin did back then, is not the logical extension of that? Well, then, we should return the marbles.
No,
try and undo that crime.
No, because by doing that, first of all, it's not a crime, and second of all, we basically would be rewinding the clocks of history, which is something that you don't do. History has a dignity in all its phase.
So this idea of the marbles being in the British Museum as a kind of testimony to, well, I suppose, the criminal acts of a former generation. Is that not something that is not historical? I mean, OK, fine, Mario says it's not criminal, that's contested.
Okay. Now you're sounding like the puppet of Neil McGregor, who goes, this is, world museum, a museum for the world, suggesting that within the European Union of Freedom of Movement, suggesting that the Acropolis Museum isn't somehow a museum for the world. It's certainly more of a museum for Europeans than Britain is these days.
Well, that's not a point I was making. I mean, I think that the Acropolis...
Did I misunderstand you, Andrew?
Yes. I was talking about... Well, I wasn't saying that the British Museum is the only museum that people can possibly go to. I've been to the Acropolis Museum.
Yeah.
I think... and in fact, if I'm going to lay my cards on the table, I agree with you. I think they should go back. But it's
a beautiful moment.
But it's interesting that you're interpreting it as a... I'm trying to tease out your views on this and whether you can see the other side.
I certainly can see the other side. And one of the great fears, of course, for all our establishment arts and culture boys, mainly boys, in Britain is that, you let one thread go, there'll be the unravelling of what happens to the Benin bronzes, and people in Berlin are worried, what about the Nefertiti bust? There's lots.
But there is a point there, isn't there?
There's all sort of establishment opinion. That's why Mary Beard, famous classicist, sits on the fence. She must be getting quite uncomfortable.
OK, but what about the British Museum in of itself? I mean, the British Museum has collections from all sorts of civilisations across the globe. And surely it does set a precedent if they return the Parthenon marbles.
The thing about the Parthenon marbles is they take up a whole wing that was built specifically for them in the British Museum. We now live in the era where we don't want to go and see artefacts in glass cages or cases anymore. We want an immersive experience, an experiential one. You can't get more immersive than these marble friezes being returned to Athens, to the hill of the Acropolis Hill.
Mario, how do you think people in Greece feel about this? Is there an overwhelming consensus there?
There is definitely a strong feeling, but it's not, despite being dominant, is not 100%. There are Greeks, actually, that say, no, you know what, there are historical reasons why this happened.
How many?
We didn't
2%?
There is a percentage.
So there's a debate going on.
There is a debate. There is also a debate. The problem is you cannot put on one side the argument of tourism. We want to give them the experience. We want to give them the love and then the emotional aspect of it. And on the other side, put what was history, what can we learn from it?
Yes.
At the end of the day, it's an historical fact. The Elgin Marbles came in this country, brought by Lord Elgin for a reason, to educate the taste and the sensibility of the Britons on what actually was the classical civilization of Athens, and he succeeded in this because they've had a powerful influence on the pivotal moment when they abandoned neoclassicism as an idealized version of an antiquity that was basically fake, and they actually said, you know what, actually, realism and what they really were is something that we should privilege now.
Yes.
Archaeology as a science basically is born on that day. And the influence is powerful not only on architecture, for example. You go all around London. You go on Regent Street, for example, or you go on Hyde Park Corner,
yes.
you go on St. Pancras Church. These marbles have had a palpable influence in
us. We've had them for, we've borrowed
absolutely,
them for 200
absolutely,
years.
but also in literature. Mary Shelley, Frankenstein comes from that.
Tessa, because I mean, I think he makes a point. I'm less concerned about trying to undo some injustice in the past. All of those people are dead. I don't care about that. What I'm interested in is the aesthetics of it, actually. I'm interested in the fact that I think with those marbles in the Acropolis Museum, the impact artistically would be more important, I think.
I agree, but we can't pretend it's not political as well, because it is. What I want to let you all know, I mean, you might be across this, but for the first time ever, we lent one of those, because British Museum fames itself, prides itself, we lend to other world museums more than any other museum.
Yes.
We lent a river god, a statue from this collection for the first time ever in 2015. Guess which country we lent it to?
I don't know.
In 2015, 1 year after the annexation of Crimea, we lent a Parthenon marble to Russia, to Putin's Russia. Are you telling me that we can argue we're fitter than the Greeks to look after these marbles?
Come back
At the end of the day, the Russians have asked for it before the Crimean annexation, and it was a long-standing partnership between the two institutions, the British Museum and the Hermitage. And the British Museum has always said, ask for it and we'll lend them. But obviously, when you lend something, you have a reasonable expectation that you are going to get it back.
Why do you think that this particular issue has been so contested? For many, many years now, there have been books written about this. You know, this is a particularly hot topic, isn't it?
So it all starts with the resurgence of the Greeks, basically, and their liberation from the Ottomans.
Yes.
What happens then is they are a dispersed people, and they need to start coalescing towards something, towards an ideal. And this ideal was, we basically are not Turks. We are not part of the empire anymore. We are actually Greeks. So we need to recuperate all that was Greek, all that was the idealized version fed to them by the Germans.
So you're saying it's partly political, partly nationalistic?
It is, absolutely. It is the birth of the nationalistic myth 20 years after the facts actually happened.
We don't have much time, Tessa. Do you want one final word?
I just want to ask, how would you feel Stonehenge, one of the stones, being removed from that monument by the Greeks when the English were having a little civil war, and us now saying, oh, look, we're democratic, could we have it back? And the Greeks saying no. How would that make us look? It would be such a classy political move to give them back. It would make Britain look
We do, unfortunately, we are out of time. One final word from you, Mariam. Why is that not classy?
It's not classy because it was all said and done. And after the events, you cannot just go back to people and say, you know what, I now have changed my mind, I want them back, when they were lawfully acquired. And since then, there is a campaign of slander and image destruction of Lord Elgin 200 years since.
Well, we're not going to resolve this tonight, but thank you both for your very passionate input on that. Dr. Tessa and Mariam, thank you.